It's Tuesday, it's 8 o'clock, and this is The Issue here on your TV. I'm Mark Carr, and tonight we've got a very interesting show for you. Just to set a little bit of the stage, we're going to have ClubLinks on, and ClubLink submitted a proposal to redevelop 92.7 hectares of the Glen Abbey golf course property, including 3,200 residential units and 121,000 square feet of new office and retail space. So with that as a backdrop, I'd like to introduce my co-host, John Sawyer, the retired CEO and president of the Oakville Chamber of Commerce. He doesn't like to be referred to as the former. He likes to be referred to as the retired.
Retired is good.
Yes,
Retired is good.
yes. So you brought on Glen Abbey, ClubLinks. So tell us why this was important.
Well, as I traveled the province and people found out I was from Oakville, the first question they would ask me is, so what's happening with Glen Abbey? And I thought it would be great to get an update on the Glen Abbey file. So I've invited Robert Visentin, who is the Senior Vice President of Investments at ClubLink. He's been in that role for the past 5 years, but he's been with ClubLink for 22 years. So welcome, Robert.
And let me just jump in here. I have contacted members of council in Oakville to come on and talk about the Glen Abbey issue. They feel that they can't come on while it's in front of the courts. So go ahead and introduce your guest.
All right. Well, I've already introduced Robert. So this is a fascinating story on many levels, and it really comes down to a battle of rights, I think, in that the rights of the municipality to determine where growth occurs and the rights of a property owner to do what they feel is best with their property. So things, I think, really began with this, well, they began with this story decades ago, but the current discussions around the property really started in 2015 when ClubLink requested a pre-consultation meeting in October 2015 with the town to discuss the potential development of Glen Abbey. The ClubLink people met in November of 2015 with the town to have that discussion, and then in November 2016, filed an application to redevelop the property. So on February 16th of 2016, am I correct? And the town put in place an interim control bylaw, which they have the right to do, and that was for 1 year, and their rationale, or what they publicly said, was it was to put policies in place to evaluate ClubLink's application. So I'm going to turn it over to Robert. I guess my first question is, where are things at today? What can you just bring us up to date?
Wow, that's a tough question
to start. We only have half an hour.
Yes. I always put this in a context of where multiple things are. There's the court applications, which we're getting near the end of, and then there's the redevelopment application itself and all the official plan changes that have occurred between 2016 and today. So the two buckets are, let's start with the redevelopment applications themselves. There's a hearing scheduled for July the 6th of 2020. It's been scheduled for 20 weeks. And that now, as of Friday, is going to be a hearing of all of the different LPAT appeals at one hearing.
LPAT
is the old OMB, which is the new name for OMB.
OMB, Ontario Municipal Board, which is an appeals process?
Yes, that's
Okay.
that's when you have disputes with the town. As you mentioned, this is about rights, and clearly the town has an official plan. They have policies within their official plan. And then landowners have the right to ask for a change. There is a misconception that owners get to do whatever they want. That's just not true. You have to do things that have merit and follow provincial policy, because everything is governed by provincial policy. And so when you have a dispute, there is a body, LPAT now, that adjudicates those disputes. And our file is before that tribunal and will be determined sometime next year. There's a few things that need to happen still in order for that hearing to occur, but that's when it's currently scheduled.
And I guess one of the first issues is on October 25th, 2018, the Ontario Superior Court held that ClubLinks can apply to demolish the golf course. That's what they indicated. The town has indicated that they were successful at that hearing because it didn't give you permission to demolish, just you had a right to apply for a demolition. Can you clarify for me those two opposing points of view?
Well, it's a 2-year fight over one word, structure. And the reality is that the town said that the golf course was not a structure, took us to court over that word, and said our interpretation is the golf course is not a structure, and we felt we had filed a valid application. This is all about whether an application has been validly filed. And the courts now, both the Superior Court and the Court of Appeal, have deemed that our application is a valid application. So that's where we're at right now with that. I'm not sure how you can say that we were unsuccessful. We were awarded costs on both of those, both the Superior Court application and the Court of Appeal.
I guess unsuccessful in that it only allows you to apply for a demolition permit. It doesn't give you permission to demolish anything at the golf course.
That's correct. The LPAT will determine whether that application is deemed successful or not. And that's included in the July 6th hearing next year.
So these are all judicial or quasi-judicial hearings. There is tremendous expense in going through these hearings. So my understanding is up until the end of 2018, the town has spent $9 million on these hearings. Of greater concern to me is that if all of the scheduled hearings and court challenges play out, that bill could escalate to upwards of $40 million. Does that make sense to you in terms of, like, are those costs real, or is that just something we're hearing on the street?
Well, let's break that down into two parts. The first part is the $9 million number that you quoted. That was reported by the Oakville Beaver in March of this year, and it was for money spent up to the end of 2018. So I always look at this in the context of where are we within all of the different judicial hearing dates that have occurred and also the ones that are scheduled. And the total heard, actual, and scheduled is 144 days in front of a judge or a master or the tribunal. And at the end of 2018, we'd only appeared 29 days. So think of it in the context 29 out of 144 versus what it will cost to finish 144 days. And that number of 44 million or 40 million is, I think is a realistic number if you spend the average you've been spending for the balance of the hearing days.
That's an awful lot of money spent by the taxpayers of Oakville. Normally, with a development application, there's an opportunity for the developer and the city, or the town in this about the development. Why isn't that occurring here?
Oh, another tough. No easy questions today. It's primarily, we've been willing in all of our applications to LPAT, we've always put that we would mediate the files. We've said that we would on every single file. The town has refused. So it's really that question you need to ask the town.
Maybe we should back up just a step or two and have you describe what the development or what your plan for the development is. Currently, the property is 100% privately owned. What's that going to look like if you were successful and the current iteration that you have planned plays out?
Well, I break that down into a couple different components. The first major component is the entire valley system, 16 Mile Creek, is going to be dedicated, renaturalized and dedicated to a government body, either Conservation Halton or the town of Oakville. So that's one big piece. Then on the tablelands, there are 150 acres of development land on the tablelands. And within
by
tablelands is the
you're
top, where you can actually build stuff.
Yeah.
You can't build anything in the valley lands. But right now there's a golf course down there. It's not really prime wildlife habitat because we're doing all kinds of stuff down there to maintain the golf course today. So I break it down into 54% of the, I do it in acres. So it's 232 acres in total. We're preserving the radar estate and the stable buildings as heritage buildings within the context of our reports. The stables are going to be a common plaza type thing, a European style gathering place. The radar estate is going to continue to be an office building as it is now. And then there'll be new office around the common area that's near the stables, which today is the maintenance barns. Then the balance of the site is roads, buildings, and I had a look at the site plan. Only 30% of the site will be privately owned when we're finished, on the assumption that it's approved as it's been filed.
And by privately owned, you mean that
you
the
and I would be
residential units are going to be owned privately?
Privately by individual citizens.
So let me understand. That's 30% in private ownership. 70% of the entire land, the 92.7 hectares, will be in the public domain.
That's correct. Be parks, 16 Mile Creek, roads, right-of-ways, stormwater management. There's 3 stormwater management ponds. All of those items would be publicly owned.
Robert, do you understand from an Oakville residential point of view, resident's point of view, how important the Glen Abbey golf course is to their lifestyle and the feeling of Oakville, and why they want to retain it as a golf course?
I do understand. I have met with the Save Glen Abbey, 4 people from the Save Glen Abbey group. Very cordial meeting, actually. And I did get some perspective on why they think it's important. The context that I always look at is, we're in an environment that's constantly in change. And this site is no different in my mind than Maple Leaf Gardens. Maple Leaf Gardens is an icon to Canadians because of all the hockey that's been played there. I look back at Glen Abbey. We've played the Canadian Open at Glen Abbey 30 times, and there's never been a Canadian win it while it's been played at Glen Abbey. It's always been a foreigner. Can't say that about Maple Leaf Gardens. All the hockey players at the time were mostly Canadian at that point. And it's now a Loblaw store. So things change, and Glen Abbey's gone through 6 iterations of evolution since the Europeans came to North America, and we're looking at the 7th iteration. That's really where we're at.
And maybe one other question that's of a general nature. If the town of Oakville wanted to retain everything, that additional 30%, as well as the 70%, what options do they have? I mean, they can buy the land from you, couldn't they? Would you be willing to sell it to the town?
I don't know whether we would or not. I don't know whether the town has never explored that option. In fact, they don't talk to us right now, so.
Well, I'm going to ask on behalf of the town, would you consider selling it to the town of Oakville?
Well, that conversation has to be done. That's above my pay grade.
Okay.
That would have to go to the board of directors, and they could make an offer, and the board would decide whether that was an acceptable offer or not.
Okay, but that's an option
but
for the
town. Of course, it's always an option. There are tons of options, and you explore those options by having a dialogue. We have not had a dialogue today.
Why is that?
We've offered to have the dialogue. The town has refused. So that's a question you need to ask the mayor and the council, not us.
The $40 million in potential costs would have made a great down payment on the property. I'm just saying that. But that's my personal opinion.
Well, that's why you're here, John.
I guess.
Well, they haven't spent it all yet.
Yeah,
So.
True. You touched on golf, of course. What about the future of the Canadian Open? At one time, I'm going to say the perception was Glen Abbey was the permanent home of the Canadian Open. So are we losing that opportunity here in Oakville? Because I know from my past role, I know what an important economic driver that was. So do you want to comment on the Open?
Well, I'll comment it in a couple different ways. Let's start in 1993. In 1993, the Glen Abbey site was designated as a historic site, but the designation was solely around the Radar Estate, which we're preserving in our plan. At that time, Golf Canada went to a CRB hearing, which is a Conservation Review Board, and at that time they said, and it's included in the report that was issued in 1993, that this was not the permanent home of the Canadian Open. And that was by the guys that were holding the tournament and owned the property. The other piece of information is that Golf Canada had submitted a redevelopment application per se to get carte blanche zoning as residential in 1998. That tells you that it wasn't the permanent home. People have coined it there because Golf Canada owned the site until 1999 when we bought it, and they held it at their own facility, so it became, the journalists called it the home of the Open.
Robert, let's get back to your proposal. One of the things that I've heard against 3,200 residential units and 121,000 square feet of office and retail is the impacts on the infrastructure. In particular, the roads can't handle that number of automobiles. Can you comment on that? And is it a legitimate concern?
Well, every concern is legitimate. Within the context of expressing the concern, how you resolve that concern is by having that dialogue between the traffic experts who may disagree on whether 3,200 is acceptable or it's not, based on their knowledge of how many people will be there and how they'll move around. Our consultants have told us that we could have submitted an application from 35 to 4,000 units, and it would have still fit within the guidelines that are acceptable. The town has a different opinion, but unless you sit down and actually have a conversation about what is acceptable, other than right now, the only position the town has taken is that nothing is acceptable. It has to be a golf course forever. So until that occurs, and that's what LPAT does, LPAT, when you get there, will have a hearing of experts that will deal with traffic issues, and they will decide who's right, whether 3,200 is right or 20. They can make a decision that it's only 2,800 units, or they could say it's approved as submitted. They have the right to do that.
And you have done traffic studies, have you not?
We have, yes.
And it indicates that the infrastructure, in particular the roads, can handle the 3,200 homes?
Yes, the reports acknowledge that that's an acceptable, I'll call it criteria for, there are criteria that these things are based on, so we believe we meet all of the criteria and are within acceptable standards.
Yep. Certainly have read recently that the ball is being kicked up to the province now. That some local politicians are saying, well, this is the province's responsibility to stop this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's interesting, because those are local politicians. Clearly, if the province stepped in to do something here, it would be at the cabinet table. And it seems odd to me that the cabinet table, after introducing more housing, more choice, would, sterilize a site that's 150 acres in the built boundary, where intensification is supposed to occur.
Now, is Oakville on a path to achieve their designated population, accepting a population by 2031, 2041, without Glen Abbey redevelopment?
Well, there's a difference of opinion on whether they would be able to achieve that or not. I do know when I was doing a review of the growth plans, when they did the new growth plans, that the population targets that the province had for the GTA were underestimated by 500,000 people at 2031. When they did the update to 2041, they increased the population estimate for 2031 by 500,000 people. That would have been filtered around the entire GTA, not just Oakville per se or Halton. So even if they were meeting targets, there's still 500,000 people, housing for 500,000 people short at that point. I do know that Build, for example, believes there were 100,000 units short across the entire GTA. So this is why the government at the provincial level is trying to fast track development opportunities that are out there for things to come forward and be moved forward so that housing can be supplied.
And we talk about it just being the Glen Abbey golf course and that redevelopment. So we talk about it in terms of Oakville. But this has larger implications to other municipalities in Halton. Tyendega Golf Course, which is a City of Burlington golf course.
Ottawa, there's a similar scenario playing out in Ottawa.
Millcroft is another one in the City of Burlington. So I guess it has larger impacts than just Glen Abbey and Oakville.
Well, and you're missing three big ones as well.
For the rest of the province, but I'm not sure that this television program gets to those people. So,
well, you're missing York Downs, the Board of Trade Country Club in Vaughan, and the National.
Yeah,
those are three big, high-profile places that are under the gun for redevelopment.
And so, do you think this is paving the way for a redevelopment of a golf course to hit those provincial targets in terms of population?
Well, it's certainly one of the items. If you recall, when
significant one in the case of the City of Burlington, which doesn't have green space available to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I come from Vancouver. I grew up in Vancouver, and I must admit that when I travel around the GTA has an abundance of green space. It's way greener than Vancouver, even though Vancouver has the mountains. But in the city itself, we have way more green space than Vancouver does.
So
that's my assessment of living half my life in each place, and it's stunning to hear that we don't have enough green space.
well,
But
I don't want to speak for the city of Burlington in particular, but we drew a line at the 407 Dundas and said no developments beyond that in the rural area. Having said that, I think the implications are much larger than Glen Abbey and just the town of Oakville. And I'm sure that it's being watched by those owners of land outside of Oakville, how you're proceeding.
No question. No question. I just want to take, that's the macro level. I want to take it right down to a micro level.
Okay, in about 90 seconds.
Okay. Maybe we can pick it up after the break then. The issue that I would hear repeatedly, the issue that has always been the number one issue in Oakville, Halton, is traffic, is congestion. So the thing I hear about Glen Abbey from the people who live in the immediate area are, we have so much traffic now, they're going to put, they being you, 3,500 units right here in the middle of everything. How on earth are we going to handle all this increased traffic? So here's your chance to tell the world, how are you going to deal with the traffic?
Well, first of all, I'm not an expert in traffic, so don't treat my statement as being an expert. But we've hired a company called BA Consulting, who are traffic experts, well recognized as being very good at the jobs they do. And they have designed a traffic system that includes a bus, a 15-minute interval bus, to the GO station and back, and it extends up into northern Oakville. That circulates on a 15-minute cycle. They feel like the traffic from our site will go 3 different routes. Some of it will go to the QEW, some of it will go to the 407, and some people will take the bus. So it's not, and that everybody doesn't move at the same time. So all of those factors get put into the hopper and to determine whether the site and the infrastructure can handle the extra 3,200 people.
Robert, sorry that we're out of time. Maybe if I can suggest, can we have you back to continue this discussion, because I think it's extremely important to the town of Oakville and beyond to hear some more information about the development of Glen Abbey.
Absolutely.
Okay.
My pleasure.
Okay, that's great.
That would be great.
Will you come back as well?
I'm here.
Okay, fair enough. Then we'll both come back and talk about Glen Abbey, ClubLinks, and the town of Oakville next time here on The Issue. I'm Mark Carr.